Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 35 of A Letter to the King. For those of you new to the series, A Letter to the King is my attempt to keep you abreast of the biff and the bash, the to and the fro of the PvP on Euro PvP 1. Before we get started, let's have a little look at where we were last week. So the battle lines had clearly been drawn south of the Yucatan here, around Belize and Salamanca, between the British and the Spanish. The Danes had grabbed up the only live oak pork a couple of weeks ago from the Americans here around Savannah. They'd also made numerous runs at the British holdings in Bermuda. The pirates were slowly spreading, slowly spreading across Cuba and Haiti. And the French and the Swedes were really beginning to push on the flank of the Dutch and trying to squeeze the Brits out of the Windward Isles. And that was more or less it. Now, before I get too much further into this, fundamentally right now the game mechanics are a bit broken for hostility generation, the ROE tagging and a whole bunch of things. So I'm not going to get involved in too much of that, other than to say that the vast majority of port battles this week came from hostility bombs. In fact, all bar one came from hostility bombs. And the majority of nations prefer to log out underneath the cutlasses than risk sailing through a screening fleet. Now, given the fact that pretty much every nation has done that, the Brits have done it, the Danes have done it, the French have done it, everybody's done it. There's no point in pointing your finger at individual nations and the shenanigans that goes on. What I would like to just give a shout out to is on the forums, in the general discussions and in the patches, there's some excellent topics for discussions. So go to the Games Lab forums, you'll find topics like this, the Dear Devs, structured analysis and solution to the current situation. And you'll see here that one of the players, a notorious player incidentally, the sort of the villain of the piece for many, has written an excellent sort of summary of stuff and shown where the problems are and then some suggestions. You don't need to agree with everything, but it's a really well thought out piece and one that's probably worth you chipping your tuppence into. And there's been a whole bunch of players from every nation basically jump on board with the sentiment of this post. So there's no piss, there's no vinegar, there's no salt in this. It's a constructive and structured analysis, and it's not the only one. There's others out there as well. If you go into here, you'll see, things around tagging and enemy war supplies, a fantastic bit of OP there. Stuff about Wandjura ships, so on and so forth. So get yourself involved in the forums, cut out the QQ, and jump on board some of these constructive posts that you'll find. You'll find them in general discussions, you'll find them in suggestions, the suggestions forum here, and often you'll find them as replies to patches and forthcoming content. So get involved, everybody. Make the game better. The devs do listen. Most of what isn't working right now comes from sort of player-inspired ideas. It's just the implementation's a bit wobbly. Let's have a look now. Interestingly enough, there was very few port battles this week. I think 9, something of the order of 9 port battles this week. So, just over 1 a day. And what it does is it puts a lot of pressure on each port battle. People are really hungry to get involved. So to some extent, they're more prestigious. We're getting huge turnouts from every nation, be it to get ships in or to biff ships as they try and arrive. The downside is outside of port battles, it's tumbleweeds. And it's the quietest I've seen the server in probably 3 months. So the next patch with hopefully a bunch of fixes can't come soon enough. Some of the real core groups, they're off playing Overwatch and World of Warships and who knows what else. Now, most important thing, obviously, we welcome our new overlords, Commander Drumpf. But I can't use him as a symbol anymore. It was done in jest, and now he's the leader of the free world. Let's not be political, otherwise I'll get all my bloody forum posts locked. So, who can I replace the voice of change with? Well, after much community consultation, we've decided the Eagle from the Muppets, who may well be running in 2020 anyway, given the pool of talent that makes it to the top these days. So the Eagle from the Muppets will now represent America. And I forgot to change it on the hearts. Note to self, scribbles down. Yep. Now, so really they've all settled now, the alliance, apart from the Swedes. The Swedes have fallen out of the alliance. They should come back in next round. And then I think everybody's back in and we're locked into this triumvirate here versus these four European old nations, as it were. In the alliances, and the pirates. I almost need to do two pirate symbols now, because I'll talk about this a bit later on in the vid, but there's some interesting stuff going on with pirates this week, and we'll have a look at that. So, what befell us this week? Well, firstly, the Brits came in to attack Cartagena. With the Dutch. I should have the Dutch symbol there. Something's gone wrong with the animation there. The Brits and the Dutch, led by the Dutch, came in to attack Cartagena, only to discover it was defended by the Danes. The Danes defended well, and what we'll see is now, and I called this out 3 or 4 weeks ago when the patch first came, with the rarity of port battles, defending. Let's pretend both fleets get in, and let's pretend both fleets get their optimum fleet in, so the cohesive unit with the right leadership, etc., with the best ships that they have to hand. 7 times out of 10, the defender should hold. And it might be even slightly more than that, but at least 7 times out of 10, the defender should hold, all things being equal. And that's normal, that's good military stuff, I have no problem with that. Historically, when you were attacking, pretty much throughout the history of warfare, you'd need a 3-to-1 force, a 4-to-1 force, unless you had some advantage such as surprise or air superiority or technological superiority. So that's okay. The defender, it should be harder to take. And then when you take, you have your prize, and now it becomes harder for other people to take. However, the Danes saw off the Dutch. Sorry, Dutch, your symbol's not appeared. I don't know what's going on. I'll be beating people up in production later on tonight. And they biffed the Dutch and their supportive Brits out of the port. The next battle was our pirate friends just eating up some of this unwanted Spanish territory. So Spain aren't really defending along here at all, which has allowed the pirates to sweep up the foot or the hoof of Cuba and gobble up around Port-au-Prince and the likes. So the pirates came into this northern part of Haiti, I think it's Puerto Plata, to just grab up this undefended port until the Danes showed up. And the Danes showed up, and these guys have got a lot of practice in the last 2 weeks, and they've got sort of a core, perhaps 30 players that they pool their defences from. And if you like, it's becoming a bit of a veteran port battle fleet. And they held off the pirates and sent them packing. Now, the next thing that happened was, after the pirates were sent packing, the Danes and the French brought a hostility bomb in against the Brits in the Windward Islands. Now, the Brits, actually a lonely British captain, spotted this. And the Brits managed to assemble. They've got lots of ships ported in Bridgetown and Kingstown. They managed to assemble 3 fleets. It wasn't at the same time. They're literally sending, as soon as they got a group of ships together, they would send them out. And the Danes, however, were escorting the French Indiaman war supply fleet. And we discovered a bit of a problem with the rules of engagement. So as the Brits got close, the Danes would tag them. The Brits didn't mind because the French ships were within the inner tag circle in many cases. However, if you have a smuggler's flag on, you don't get called in. Now, the Brits couldn't get past the Danes in order to tag the French because the Danes would counter-tag first. They would preemptively tag. And the British sent 3, a few Dutch came with them, 3 fleets in to knock over this Indiaman fleet and try and stop a hostility bomb. But it was unstoppable, basically, because of the ROE. So there's another bit of broken mechanic there. That smugglers... So this has been put on, so if you're grabbing a smuggler up just outside a port, because the circle's about a quarter of the map, you don't pull in, half of the Caribbean. But in this particular case, it's not working probably as designed, or it's working as designed, but not as you would want. However, the Dutch and the British mounted a sterling defence of Bridgetown. A fantastic screening fleet was put up, and I think at the end of that one, the Spanish lost about 20 ships. No, 15 ships went in, and I don't think any came out, and the rest got involved in screening actions. I just want to point out as well that the Danish fleets that are involved in these other two battles I mentioned earlier on, they have if you look in my liked videos section, there's a Danish captain, and he streams a lot of his videos and he records them up there, and it's well worth watching. It's in Russian, but that's good, you can learn another language. And in I can't remember which one it was, I think it was the Puerto Plata. No, it wasn't. It was in the first one. That's right. It was in the Cartagena. There's a fantastic fire ship that goes off and just flattens a whole bunch of first rates. That's well worth watching. So if you like watching a port battle, I'd strongly recommend going into my liked videos sections, and you'll see the Russian, Danish players' videos. I've liked pretty much all of them. Thank you very much, Creative Cloud. So next, the British, not to be undone by all of these hostility bombs, combined with their American cousins, and here we see the debut of the American Eagle, to do a dual hostility bomb where both were dropped. Fat Boy and Little Man were dropped at exactly the same time on Savannah and San Agustin. Now, these two regions are very important because they contain the only live oak supply on the server. So the Americans went in against the Danes, and the Brits went in against the Spanish. Now, the Spanish were joined by the Swedes, and so this ended up being a bit of a mixed fleet. And the Dutch assisted generally, but in particular with the British going in. The Dutch were screening for the British going in. The pirates were generally biffing up anybody, to be honest, as they like to. And so a couple of big port battles kicked off. And initially, these are both first-rate port battles. The Americans didn't fare at all well against the Danes, losing 2/3 to 3/4 of their fleet. And really the sort of young American first-rate fleet, it's probably only had 2 first-rate battles in the last 3 months, coming up against the Danes, who already had played 4 times in port battles during the week. It was a bit like the Irregulars versus Napoleon's Old Guard, the Invincibles, because the Danish fleet knew what they were doing, had an intention, had the defensive advantage, and absolutely spanked the American fleet, which was supplemented by a few British captains. And no criticism of the Americans there. That's just training wheels, and the best way to get over that is to get back on your horse and keep on bashing. Learn from your mistakes. As long as you learn from your mistakes. I know the American commander who led sort of wasn't very happy with himself, but cheer up, bud, because the only way you get better is to keep on biffing. The Danes had more port battles that week than the Americans had probably been involved in the last month. So no disgrace there. And any first-rate fleet attacking will have an advantage. Now, with this particular attack below against the Spanish and Swedish, and again my icon's not appearing, very disappointing. The Spanish and Swedish attack What we had here was predominantly, this was a very much a British first-rate fleet. It did have a special guest star Duchy in it. And that was because I bloody woke up at pillock o'clock in the morning on a work day. Oh no, that's right, it was at lunchtime. That's right, I was too sick for work. And turned up for this because I really fancied getting involved in a nice first-rate port battle. And I got the port entry bug where I had the hostility points. I must have clicked on the damn thing 15 times, escaping, continuing, clicking on other ships, starting a tag on them, cancelling it, re-picking the crosshairs. And eventually I didn't get in, so one of the Dutch screeners jumped in a second rate. And of course I got picked off by half a dozen bloody Spaniards on the outside. But thankfully a couple of British fifth rates and a Dutch second rate came and saved my bacon. So I managed to get away from a couple of second rates and co in my lovely victory. Bless her cotton socks. Now the port battle itself really is a tale. So you had the Spanish and the Swedish combined fleet. Now an entire Spanish line ship fleet or an entire Swedish line ship fleet is a good match for a British fleet. However, it was clear that the two halves really weren't in synchronicity, and it really didn't end at all well for the sort of combined Spanish-Swedish fleet, and they lost probably half their first rates in that battle and a couple outside as well. And I'm not in this particular case, don't get me wrong, Spain or Sweden, I'm absolutely not having a go at you. But we've seen this in a few of these port battles now, how important leadership is. It can't be undersold. 25... There's a great saying, actually, that goes back to sort of Plato in the Greek times. And it's, I'd rather... I'd sooner face 1,000 lions led by a sheep than 1,000 sheep led by a lion. And no criticism at all, please don't post shit. And I'm not criticising the Spanish or the Swedes. I'm trying to emphasise the importance of solid leadership. The Brits did have good leadership going into that battle. The Swedes and Spanish clearly didn't. You could tell that just watching the stream and watching the map unfold. How quite literally half the fleet would do one thing and the other half wouldn't, and just that synergy, the most important thing. So it's very important to have. This is true of any. I know a lot of folks who play naval action have got military backgrounds, so they're far wiser than I. But there's two things you need in a good port battle fleet. So you need good leadership and the comms that goes with it, and people letting the leadership lead and following them to death's door and at least dying together, rather than just going off and doing your own thing. But at the same time, each individual player needs the wisdom to understand how to follow an order. So if the whole fleet is told to turn north to turn north to 90 degrees or whatever, you have to know if your side is absolutely rooted and you'll be exposing it by following that order, that you need to sail on a little bit further and then turn to 70 or something to get back to the main fleet. You need to know if you're on an enemy ship that spending 2 more broadsides, 2 more minutes, is worth putting him to the bottom more than following the fleet. But then you need to know to get back in. And equally, if your fleet is strung out in a big line and you're told to turn to 90, well, the people at one end of the fleet really should be turning to 80 and the people at the other end of the fleet should be turning to 100, so you follow the intention of your glorious leader. And that's a drill. That's the thing people get playing well together. We've all followed these sports teams that have got 10 superstars in but play like a bunch of muppets. And that's because of the synergy and cohesion of the same people being involved. And as much as folks like to think this is a game that anyone can jump in and get involved, I'm sure you've all played games where you've participated in pickup groups or you've participated in an organised sort of clan group. Be that World of Warships, World of Tanks, any Dota, Hon, any of these type of things. So leadership is critical. but so is the familiarity of the cohort engaged in battle. And so the Brits managed to take this southern port thanks to their Dutch friends, and really very much thanks to the Americans who threw themselves onto the Danish guns up north. So the double hostility bomb did its deal. The only non-hostility bomb battle that commenced this week was the Swedes basically handed over a port to the French, and even then the French logged out underneath their sticks. So everybody is just, port battles are so rare now, you just have to make them happen. So the French grabbed up some land down here in, this is called Trinidad, not to be confused with Trinidad. This region here is called Trinidad, just north of Orinoco and south of the Windward Islands. Now, you bite me and I'll bite you back twice. You bite me twice, I'll bite you back 3 times. So in a super duper coordinated effort, the Danes, the Swedes and the Spanish, within the same 30 seconds, all dropped hostility bombs on British Bermuda, Belize and the Windward Islands. Probably the 3 top strategic targets to hit. You've got Bermuda with the wood. They should have hit here, but they couldn't because of the hostility cooldown. They hit Bermuda for the wood, and the fact it's a bastard to get back. They hit Belize because they know this is essentially the front line of the Northern Alliance. And they hit the Windward Islands because this would substantially weaken the partnership between the Dutch and the British in prosecuting war along Venezuela and into the Antilles. So all 3 of these dropped at the same time, and disaster pants for yours truly because it was on a bloody work morning. It was so that's no good. Although I did end up watching the stream and being late for work anyway. And so 3 mighty battles were fought in really what was probably the busiest day since the new patch in naval action. And first of all, the Spanish tried for Belize. Now, Belize is a bugger of a port to get into, and the Spanish did try to get into it. It's a very hard one to camp your ships in because it takes quite a while to sail into Belize, and there's simply too much traffic sailing around. So there isn't any quiet time you can sail into Belize. There's almost always a Brit player sailing in and out of the Belize port. And you're caught in literally a vice. Belize is sort of a channeled entrance with forts at the channel entrance too. So the Spanish tried to sail in there, and interestingly enough, the pirates got involved. Now this was very surprising and welcomed from the British perspective, but there were pirates getting involved around here. And then the British had 2 large fleets outside the port ready to screen. And at the end of the day, the Spanish didn't make it in whatsoever to Belize. They didn't darken its door. Next came the Battle of the Windward Islands, and this was fought entirely by the Dutch. And they rolled out a beautiful looking 25 ship Agamemnon fleet. I do like it when a nation puts the effort into crafting a fleet. The Danes run around in predominantly a Santi-Leotian fleet, but the Leotians have the strong hull bonus, which means they deliver a punch and they can take on the truly heavyweight ship. About as manoeuvrable as a Martello Tower, but truly heavyweight, devastating broadside. And the Dutch, they defended this port, and this was an interesting one. We had no comms while they were doing this with the Dutch, so there was just a lot of fingers crossed going on, and of course there was a lot of comms flying around these 2 ports at the time. And the Dutch did well. They defended that solidly. I think they sank 2/5 of the Swedish fleet for the loss of maybe 2 ships. So they did splendidly there. And cheerio Swedes. So this stays in British hands very much thanks to the Dutch partners. And then the crazy bonkers Battle of Bermuda. So the Americans made the long sail for the second time in 7 days, this 2-hour sail to help defend British interests, and Many 07s go to them. The Dutch also have numbers assisting in screening. However, the Danes were under the flag. And let's not make any mistake, the Americans were under the flag up here. So this is absolutely not saying anything. So the Danes got into the port battle, and there was a bit of a how's your father with the British. A couple of their normal fleet commanders didn't manage to get in. The Danes love to play with a mortar brig, and they send their big boys, their Santis and Lotions, just to punch you in the face, while their mortar brig nibbles away at your towers. So they don't need to worry about capping the towers or destroying the towers. If you have there's 5 towers in a port battle. They're in a sort of horseshoe shape. The front 2 are the ones that shoot at you first. You don't really need to kill those other than to stop them shooting at you, because they do cause damage and kill crew. It's the bottom 3 towers in a deep water port battle you need to take. And you can't win if you don't take them. It's as simple as that. Now, if you're killing the towers, then fundamentally your fleet is on a predictable path around the port battle. But what the Danes like to do is they go in a sort of, to, not being overly polite, they go in a blob, they go in a brawl, they look like English football hooligans on the town, and they just kick the crap out of you with their big punchy Lotions and Santis. Meanwhile, they have a little mortar brig at the back of the fleet, hard to get to, certainly out of shooting range, and he is slowly snotting all your towers. So the Brits have got wise to this, and are learning, sort of dinosaur style. And they brought a Connie in, and it chased the brig around the map and gave it no respite. Now, in the end, the Connie kind of got caught in the Danish fleet and blew up a little bit. But it meant that by the hour mark, the Danes would normally have all the towers down, and by the hour mark, they only had 1 down. And we're only getting 1 more. And both nations, although the Danes sort of won it massively on ship kills, it was something like 20-5, something of that order. Massively on ship kills. They failed to take the port, and really there were 2 strategic blunders by both sides. The Brits, first of all, played into the Danish game and got involved in a brawl earlier on. And the Danish stronghold Santis and Losians, they come into the brawl with double shot loaded on both sides. And if you take a broadside from a Lotion that's got double shot loaded, you'll lose 1/3 of your hull strength. And if 2 of them hit you, you're not out of it, but now you're a little bit tender, you're a little bit anxious about showing that side, so it pretty much tells you which way you have to turn. Now, the weakness of the Dane fleet is it's slow and fat and can't turn in the wind because it's Santis and Lotions. Although they're faster, the Santi's faster in a straight line speed than a Vic. As soon as it's off her wind, the Santi is basically an upside down barn. It's contoured by breeze block, the Santi, not a curve on it, during the Cubist period of ship design. So that was the big mistake of the Brits. In the first 40 minutes, they really got themselves into poop street by trying to, sort of a middleweight, trying to get involved in a punching fight with a heavyweight. It was looking pretty bleak. However, the Danes made a big tactical blunder too. They didn't realise their mortar brig was struggling, or if they did, they didn't do much about it. And by the time they dispatched ships to take the tower and tried to move their mortar brig into position, it was basically, there was a whole blob of ships kicking the pants off each other on the outer circle. And then it was like 3 or 4 Danish ships versus 2 or 3 British ships. The British ships sank the mortar brig, knocked the bowsprit off one of the Danes so he couldn't turn through the wind to get to the tower. And it reminded me of, not this week, but the previous week, where the Brits failed to take Cartagena by about 15 seconds because they couldn't cap the last tower. And this became the Cartagena for the Danes. They just couldn't get in there. So in the end, the Danes were repelled. Only a Pyrrhic victory to the Allied Brit, Dutch and American forces, because the British lost so much shipping. Like I say, 2/3, 3/4 of a first-rate fleet sent to the bottom. and I'm sure the Danes will be back again, but yeah, another classic battle. So that's a lot of action going on. Where will we see it again next week? Well, that's a good question. Yeah, we're 3 weeks on the trot. The Danes have gone for Bermuda. So on the basic past behaviour is the best predictor of future behaviour. One would imagine that again. There's always going to be friction around the Florida coast because of the live oak production. Even if it's not port battles, it's super duper ship sinking, people trying to get fine live oak off each other. This is a hotspot between the Brits and the Spanish. The Dutch, every week now, they've tried to push out from their base here, so one can only imagine that will happen again. The Windward Islands, you can't imagine them being left alone. Big question mark as to what the pirates are going to do. I have great sympathy for the pirates at the moment. I mean, I hate them because they're pirates. The gameplay is just wrecked for them at the moment. I've seen a few comments about the pirates are for hire. To my knowledge, no one has hired them, but actually, people should hire them. People should hire mercenary fleets to screen or even do port battles or anti-port battles for you. Hire the pirates. Pirates are cheap. They'll do anything for a bottle of rum and a wink. Doesn't matter what gender the wink's from, they're pirates. Any contact's good contact when you've been at sea with a bunch of bearded fellas for a couple of years. So that's that. Let's have a look at the incredibly, this is like a cricket scoreboard these days. Certainly not an Australian cricket scoreboard, it'd be over too quickly, but a cricket scoreboard. Spain lost another few ports. That was the British taking out St Augustine. You'll see the Brits taking those, and the French and the Swedes swapped a port. That's it. So there's only 2 changes, and everybody else is steady as you go. And here's the irony of all ironies. The Danes, who I think were involved in 7 of the 9 port battles this week, are at the bottom of the all-important tally of splinters, sail and blood. So next week, if the Danes carry on like this, we're going to rename this to Danal Action. I think that has a certain ring to it. Everybody likes a little bit of Danal action. We're 2 weeks away from the new ports patch. Let's hope they fix the ROE when they do. And that's pretty much it for this week's Letter to the King. So just a reminder, guys, get involved in the forums. Get your ideas in. Be constructive. Hope you liked it. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.